Joe, good to see you. How you doing? Evening. How you been, Joe? You're the first one in. Pablo, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Troy, good to see you. How you been? JP, good to see you as well. Good evening. How you doing? Autistic, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Hi there. Have you 100% now? I have. I feel a lot better. Definitely 100% now. But also towards the end of the live, I'm going to share some news as well. But yeah, I'm feeling a lot better than I was. Okay, by the time everyone tunes in, let's go through what we're going to be talking about on tonight's live, and by that time, everyone's pretty much tuned in. So, on tonight's episode of CMF Live, on episode essentially 315, we're going to be talking about certain topics. There's a lot of things actually happening in terms of trade negotiations, which is, having positive effects on the crypto market space. We're also going to be talking about the World Economic Forum in the project that we're going to get to once we get to that news. But here's a breakdown of what we're going to talk about on tonight's episode. This is episode 315 of the CMF Live. If you watch this for the first time ever, the CMF stands for Crypto Mouse Family. My name is Mars, and you can tune to this live Monday to Friday, where I talk about the most recent news happening around the world in terms of cryptocurrency, CBDCs, AI, and regulations. Pretty much everything you need to know about the world going into this digital space. We also Q&As on this live as well, which means if you do have any questions or statement, put them down in the comment section. Also, we essentially the disclaimer of this live is, as usual, not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. So, on tonight's episode of CMF, we're going to be talking about the market space because it's actually giving a push towards the crypto market space. We're also going to go through news regarding the EU-US essentially trade deals. We're going to go through essentially a perspective that came out from the European Central Bank on the US dollars and how euros could maybe take up. We're also going to be talking about tonight's live regarding Canada. Canada's manufacturing is not doing too well. Apparently, not doing a deal with Trump is actually making Canada much more worse. And we're also going to be talking about Elon Musk, essentially money project, which is now named essentially X Money. It's also going to be launching very soon. We're going to be talking about tonight's live regarding the ASEAN countries as well. Everybody obviously knows the G7 countries, G20 countries, and essentially the BRICS. But there's also the other group, which is the ASEAN group. We're going to talk about what their game changer moves on in terms of trade negotiations and how much it could bring some sort of activity towards the crypto market space. We're also going to go through news on tonight's live regarding a perspective coming out from Cardano regarding Ripple. We'll talk about tonight's live regarding the International Monetary Fund, a perspective that came out today, the US dollar collapse and how we're actually going, very quietly in that perspective towards a digital future. We're going to go through news on tonight's live regarding also the corporations enhancing essentially their Bitcoin holdings and what's that matter. We're going to be talking about Trump Media. Apparently, there's a report that's out regarding Trump Media and what their next investments are going to be inside the crypto space. We're going to Zealand news on tonight's live as well regarding their central banks, and we're going to go through news regarding Florida on tonight's live as well regarding cryptocurrencies, and we're also going to be talking about Binance's perspective. The CEO of Binance, Richard Teng, has came out with a new perspective on the crypto market space. We're going to go through World Economic Forum news as well on tonight's live. They've talked about one particular crypto project. We're going to go through XRP news as well as usual on tonight's. So Before we go through the first news on tonight's live, which is regarding the Japanese, which is actually helping the crypto market space to do quite well for itself. Let's go inside the comment section first, then we go straight into the Japanese market space news. So, hi there. Already done. Funky brother, good evening, brother Miles and CMF family. Good to see you as well. How you doing, Funky brother? How you? What is the best crypto app? In what sense? In sense of trading, in sense of keep hold of your portfolio. If you're talking about a record of your portfolio, CMC is the best app for that. And in the sense of essentially trading, you could use Binance Exchange, you could use MEXC Exchange. You want to go? I'll be very honest with you. Jeffrey, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Now, the Japanese market space is actually helping the crypto market space do well. Miles, is it worth looking to ZBEC networks? Okay, here's my perspective on ZBEC. Some people might like it, some might not like it. Here's the thing: ZBEC it's a legitimate project, and I believe it's going. And I said this once on a phone call with a member of the CMF as well. I was asking do I think ZBEC is going to do well for itself and so on? And I said the same thing I said on the phone call. I'm going to say it now on the live as well. I do believe ZBEC is going to go up in value, in price, but I don't know if it's value over time. So that's my genuine opinion on ZBEC. Everybody's talking about now, everybody's talking about ZBEC this, ZBEC that. And I'm not saying it's a bad project. It's a legitimate project. Been around for the longest time. Will go up in price, as I said, but I don't know if it can hold its value over time. That's the only thing. So if you want, look into it. If you want to jump into it, it's completely up to you. It's your choice, not financial advice at all. As I said in the question as well, not financial advice. But that is my genuine opinion about ZBEC. It's the talk of the town, and sometimes the talk of the town, that town suddenly does also disappear from the town suddenly, if you know what I mean. We've had projects like this inside the crypto space that suddenly come out of, retire. ZBEC is a very, very old project, you could say. We've had projects inside the crypto space. They come out of retirement and everybody's talking about it for a few weeks and then nobody about it in the next few weeks. So just keep that in mind. Now, Japan's bond crisis is what we're going to talk about next. Japan's bond crisis pushes Bitcoin towards 112,000 essentially dollars. The Japanese market space is actually helping Bitcoin climb in value. In the past, the Japanese market space did essentially disrupt the market space in a sense. But this time around, Bitcoin is actually hedged against this scenario, which is nice to see, with the crypto market space in general being seen as a hedge against this scenario. So here it is. The Japanese bond market is showing signs of significant strain, and the ripple effects are essentially being felt across the global financial markets. Yields in bonds have been also climbing, triggering essentially alarms among institutional investors concerned about their rising sovereign credit risk scenarios. According to Bitwise, one of the crypto asset managers, the unease essentially is leading to increased interest in alternative assets. As trust in traditional government debt instruments weakens, investors are essentially reassessing their portfolios. Japan, known for its ultra-low interest rates and stable financial essentially portfolios, is now facing doubts about the long-term sustainability of its net load. These fears are essentially encouraging big players to look beyond bonds markets for their store of value. This is one of the main reasons why the crypto market space is doing slightly well today, and it's because they're seeing, essentially the crypto market space as an alternative to hedge against traditional assets. As I said, the Japanese market space essentially went for a tumble. It took down the stock market and slightly the crypto market with it as well. This time around, the Japanese market is going through the same tumble scenario, but crypto is actually seen as the alternative market, which is a positive to see. Bitcoin is increasingly being essentially viewed not just as a speculative asset, but as a financial hedge, similar to gold. This new narrative is gaining essentially traction among institutions, especially in the context of Japan's bond instability. This reports that institutional demand for Bitcoin is accelerating, and the price of Bitcoin has already surged to essentially $112,000. The shift signals a broader trend. Investors are seeking assets that are not directly tied to the performance or stability of any of the country's economy. Bitcoin, with its decentralized nature and fixed supply, offers a compelling alternative to traditional instruments and vulnerable to inflation credit risks. What we're witnessing is a pivot. Institutional investors are no longer simply diversifying with equities or foreign currencies. They're now actively embracing digital assets. It's a brilliant thing to see. The narrative that essentially crypto can act as a hedge against sovereign debt crisis once needed is quickly becoming mainstream. This changing investment landscape may be a sign of what to come, not just for the entire world, as economic essentially facing, as the rest of the globe is also facing economic essentially challenges. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies continue to be seen as a safe haven during financial instability. Its role in institutional portfolios is likely to expand even further. Japan's government is also setting significant tariff negotiations with the United States, essentially on the 30th of this month in Washington. This high hope portfolio essentially profile could international trade dynamics aimed ongoing economic uncertainties, and the Japanese government will convene a new season of trade negotiations with the United States, which would also help to pick up their market space. These discussions led essentially Rosso, Japan's Minister for essentially Revelations, and Scott Benson, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, are set to focus on tariffs and economic collaborations between the nations. Essentially late May, these talks mark the fourth essentially ministerial dialogue since the series has begun. The agenda addresses international trade imbalances with potential implications on global markets as the two economic giants align with their essentially policies. Businesses and investors worldwide are paying essentially close attention to Scott Benson, a U.S. scholar, essentially stated these negotiations represent a crucial step towards our trade strategies for mutual benefit between these two nations. Research that these tariff negotiations could reshape economic essentially policies, promoting regulatory scrutiny. Historical trends suggest a pattern of market shift linked to such international discussions. And essentially, while the talks aim for alignments, financial outcomes remain speculative, highlighting the global economic landscapes and inherent volatility. So, the Japanese market space is going through a tumble, and that tumble is actually positive for the crypto space because Japanese essentially investors are hedging against the Japanese traditional assets with essentially cryptocurrencies. Hence why you're seeing crypto, slightly up to date, in Bitcoin slightly up to date as well. In the past, the Japanese market space tumbled and it took down the stock market and the crypto market with it. But this time around, investors are actually seeing crypto as a hedge rather than going for holding currencies in their portfolios or even going towards gold. Not saying they're not going towards gold because they are, but they're also going towards, which is incredible to see. Now, regarding essentially the EU and US is what we're going to talk about now. The EU and the US agreed to accelerate trade negotiations. EU essentially and US officials agreed to speed up their trade negotiations, boosting a market sentiment affecting both equities and cryptocurrencies. This is also what's helped to essentially put a positive smile on everybody's faces at crypto space today. The accelerated negotiation signal improved US and EU relations, leading to positive market reactions, including the rise in cryptocurrencies today and equity prices. Significant move, the European Union and the United States have agreed to expedite their trade negotiations. President essentially Ursula von der Leyen, President Donald Trump spearheaded these talks essentially for a tariff essentially resolution to be happening. The negotiations see the EU zero for zero proposal still in consideration. According to Ursula, the European Union's zero for zero proposal is still on the table in tariff talks with the US. Meanwhile, Marshall essentially plans discussions with the US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, reflecting high levels essentially of involvement. Following the announcements, the US and the EU equities registered gains, reflecting improved market sentiments between these two. Cryptocurrencies essentially like Bitcoin and Solana and XRP rebounded, showcasing renowned investor confidence. The talks also highlight political cooperations between these two economies. The delay in tariff implementations aids essentially in reducing short-term market volatility and potential economic disruption. Past US and EU trade disputes have led to market volatility across essentially equities and digital assets. A similar pattern is also observed with cryptocurrencies acting as a risk geopolitical essentially hedges. Previous trends also indicate that successful negotiations often essentially restore market calm. Experts suggest essentially positive correlations between risk assets may continue if diplomatic resolutions advance further. So the EU and the US having talks essentially regarding coming to some sort of a deal on the table for a zero for zero essentially tariff scenario could also put a positive smile on everybody at the crypto space as well. The market will pick up as well. If it happens, that would be absolutely brilliant. Now the interesting part is some EU countries actually want to do a deal with Trump. So we know for a fact that Italy wants to do a deal with Trump. There's a few other essentially European nations out there that want to do a deal with the US. However, Christian Lagarde, who is essentially in charge of the EU, you could say, head of the European Central Bank, doesn't want that to happen in a way. So this is what the head of the essentially European Central Bank, and this was from a speech today. Christian Lagarde says Trump's chaos gives Europe the perfect opportunity to dethrone the US dollar. So while some European countries want to do a deal with the US and Trump, Christian Lagarde essentially wants to dethrone the US dollar and replace it with. I don't know if that's going to work in any sort of way, because if we're going to move away from fiat in general, not move to a replacement of the US dollars. Christian Lagarde, head of the European essentially Central Bank, said today in Berlin that the ongoing chaos in Washington under President Donald Trump is handing Europe a prime opportunity to push the euros into the spotlight and start taking power from the US dollars. Bold, very bold words from her comments were made during a speech that essentially, according to Bloomberg, laid out how Trump's unpredictable economic behavior creating a perfect opening for Europe to evaluate the euros as a global currency. Christian essentially said that if essentially the EU governments finally sort out their long-standing essentially issues blocking the bloc economic potential, they could get rewarded with better access to finance, less to wild currency swings, and protection from foreign essentially sanctions. The message was simple from Christian Lagarde. She said, "Stop dragging your feet or miss your chance." She pointed out that the euros has already gained ground in a period of uncertainty when we essentially should normally have seen the dollar appreciate significantly, citing essentially a flight of this from the dollar as confidence in the US economy eroded Trump's essentially leadership. The warning signs are everywhere. Christian essentially recalled how the 1970s Richard Nixon set the dollar's convertibility to gold, a moment that could have hurt the dollar's global dominance if there had been a viable essentially alternative. Now she's saying in 2025, she says the euros is the alternative to the US dollars. Today there is the euros, another international currency alongside the dollar, she said, and at this time financial already reacting. She described the euro's strength as a counter essentially to the US dollars, but completely logical. Given the current essentially disarray in the US policies and the steady deterioration of the investor trust, Christian also laid out 3 conditions Europe must meet if the euro is going to step in more dominant as a role. First, she called for a solid, credible, essentially geopolitical foundation by defending open trade, pairing it with strong security commitments. Second, she repeated her long-standing push for economic reform within the EU, build the single market, cut down regulations, support startups, and for savings and investment unions that's been in limbo for years. She insisted on more essentially joint European essentially financing, especially for essentially defense. Europe's logic tells us that the goods need to be jointly finance. She said if this happens, investors will have a bigger pool of safe assets to from, a requirement for any serious reserve currency. Christian isn't the only one at the European Central Bank pushing ideology of euros taking over the US dollars. Louise, the bank vice president, also said the euros could rival the dollar if Europe ramps up its integration. Isabella, another executive board member from the European Central Bank, said Europe now has a historical opportunity to further strengthen its international role of the euro. Both officials demand for a much larger European bond market to support the euros and reserve roles. In her speech and a follow-up interview published today, Christian also said that the chaos in the US, from attacks on the Federal Reserve to rising questions around the country's legal systems, trade policies, is making Europe look like the most stable option. At a time essentially we see the rule of law, the judicial system, and trade rules being called question in the US, where uncertainty is permanent and announced daily, Europe is rightly perceived as a stable economy and as a political area with a sound currency and an independent central bank. She also pointed to the developments like the digital euros and the single capital market, saying there is a groundswell more powerful than anything I've seen in 6 years in office. Christian also made it clear that achieving real harmonization of supervising, just like the EU did with banking regulations, is now essential for Europe, wants essentially the euros to be taken seriously on a world stage. Christian Edwards, with a direct shot at Trump, repeated attacks on the Fed. The independence of the central bank is fundamental to monetary and financial hygiene with a country or a group of countries. She said, in every case where a central bank has fallen under the thumb of physical authority, it has never ended well. So, while some European countries want to do a contract, some sort of a partnership, a trade deal with Trump's organization, with the US, the European Central Bank has come out today with a bold statement and firing shots, the head of the European Central Bank firing shots at essentially Donald Trump. And how he's trying to control the Fed, that it's not a free market, that he's trying essentially to control everything around them. And this is the perfect opportunity for the takeover. Just a few things. I just want to point out a few things. Her statement about essentially Trump wanting to control the Fed and how it's not an open. Interesting that she said that, because if we recall 2 weeks back, the European Central Bank pressured certain countries from going towards Bitcoin investments. I wouldn't say, he goes on to say, essentially Trump is trying to control the Fed and dictate what their next movements are. But isn't that what she does as the head of the European Central Bank? When she said to certain countries like Croatia and so on, you're not allowed to go towards Bitcoin investments. Even though their own central bank, those European countries' own central banks said, we're going to go towards cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin and so on. And then the next day, Christian Lagarde said, so she talks about how Trump is trying to control the Fed, the outcome, and dictate its movements. But she's doing the exact same thing through the European Central Bank, dictating those countries' movements towards crypto assets. And she also goes on to say a lot more other things regarding the shots at Trump and so on. She goes on to say how the euros is the perfect time for the euros to take over the dollars and take over the dollar's dominance, and that the European economy is stronger than ever before. I'm sorry, has she not seen the factories that are closing domino back to back in Germany? Volkswagen is closing down essentially factories like they're closing down stores. Germany, who is pretty much, you could say, one of the European economy, is not doing too well. They have high immigration, high inflation, and their factories are closing down one by one. It's a terrible real estate economy, where 1,600 real estate firms have closed. And then you go on to Italy, which is also not doing too great. Why Italy wants to do a deal with Trump. So she talks about how Europe essentially is, this strong economy that could go up against the US. Well, Europe is crumbling. Second of all, her talking about how Trump dictates the movements of the Fed. That's wrong for anybody to dictate the movements of the Fed or control any bank or any move. She does the exact same thing through the European Union. She does the exact same thing essentially through the European Central Bank when she dictates the movements of crypto movements and central banks. So she criticized Trump for is exactly what she's doing to her own nations. So what a hypocrite. Honestly, what an absolute hypocrite. And the third thing, euros taking over the dollar, no thank you. Because if we're going to go, essentially if we're going to move away from the US dollars, let's not move into another fiat currency, because euros also is printed out. They also have fraction banking. So euros out of thin air too. So no thank you. No thank you to any sort of fiat currencies. Just go digital in general. Move away from this printing scenario. Saying that USDT keeps on printing, no. Now, moving away from that news to Canada. But before we talk about Canada, let's consider first. As I said previously, this is live as usual, which means if you do have questions or comments to make, put them down inside the comment section. I read everybody's comments at once. So let's go through the comment section and then we go straight into the next, which is regarding Canada. Joe says, any thoughts on Ripple custody? Is it defeating the subject of our cold wallet? Any regarding talking points on Ripple custody? I think it's a great thing. Regarding Ripple custody, it's only for institutions. It's not really for the retail section, to be fairly honest. Miles, can you please twitch or to wire on your mic? It keeps twitching. I don't know why that keeps on. I'll be very honest. It's very weird. Sorry about that. Is it still morning, Miles of CMF? Shelly, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Evening, Miles of CMF. Pierce, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Happy Pies, how you doing? How you been? Good evening, Miles and CMF. Free Fair. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? What up, Miles and CMF? Ray, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Miles. Manny, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? I'm getting a twitchy voice from you and about 3 frames per second from your video. Not sure if it's just me. I've gone out and come back into your live and it's still the same. Hello, Miles and CMF. Comatous, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? I'm assuming they have different laws, pretty much. Moving to YouTube glitches. USA has more debt than able to pay off. It's true. That is why their credit is downgraded. That's also true. Good evenings and family. Ian, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Now, Canada. It turns out Canada isn't having that all-around great economy it thought it would have without the US. So here it is. Manufacturing and factory sales have taken a significant hit. The Canadian essentially factory activities low in April. Essentially, the report has came out now. Is Canada standing strong? You know, essentially saying we don't Trump, we can do it. You know, we can prop up our own manufacturing, do our own trades and so on. Is what Canada's new leader has said. But the reports are in, and they're not doing too good. A primary report showing a sharp fall, not a slight fall, a sharp fall, in essentially in sales, led by drops in petroleum, coal, and motor vehicles. Canada is not doing too great whatsoever. At the time, a group of visiting essentially US senators urged Canada to give us another chance on trade and tourism, seeking to shore up ties strained by recent tariffs and disputes. According to the statistics that just came out, Canada's early estimate, manufacturing sales fell by 2 in April from March. The agencies based essentially this figure on responses covering about 59% of this usual monthly surveys. More complete results are due June essentially 13th. In March, manufacturing sales had already dipped by 1.4%, the largest drop in 7 months, following a 0.2% decrease in February. Analysts have said that the weakness reflected in the first essentially of US imports on Canadian steel and aluminium, which took effect essentially late in the previous quarter, lower metal sales after 4 months of gain, significant essentially factor. That same report showed essentially inventories slide 0.7% in March after 2 months of build-ups, but new essentially orders were only up 1% from February, suggesting some pickup in demand. Additional data from the S&P Global essentially painted a gloomier picture. The Canadian Manufacturing Purchasing Index fell for the 3rd month in a row, also essentially dropping to 43% in April from essentially 46.3% in March. Any reading below 50 signals essentially contraction of April's reading was the weakest since May 2020. Both outputs and new orders continued to be weakened. Against this backdrop, 5 US senators made a rare to Ottawa essentially last week. They met Friday and essentially with Prime Minister Mark Carney, who has essentially said he wants a fresh economic and security partnership with the United States, despite what he called an end to an era of deep integrations. Republican Senator Kevin of essentially North Dakota told essentially Mercedes Stephan on the West Bloc that the stronger ties were vital, and to have this essentially together, he said, will be better if we're friends than we're just tolerating one another, which is honestly the best thing you could pretty much say. Canada has, as I said previously, not to do some sort of trade negotiations either with any country or get back to doing trade negotiations with states, because they have no choice. They are crumbling from within as much as they want to show they have some sort of power or authority. Relations between the two countries have chilled since President Donald Trump imposed broad tariffs against essentially imports and suggested Canada could become the 51st state. Tourism has also taken essentially a hit to essentially their tourism market space. This Canada reported 4 straight months of steep year-over-year declines in U.S. visitors to Canada, and some U.S. states have responded with ad campaigns to send Canadians back. Virginia's Democratic Senator Tim said bookings by Canadian tourists to his states are down significantly. He and essentially his fellow senators wanted to ease essentially in Canada. He said, "We are aware because we all have great friends in Canada. There is a lot of essentially anxiety about it. Well, gosh, what do Americans think of us? The 5 of us wanted to come to say, look, we love Canada." So some essentially Democrats are actually going to Canada to ease relationships. Trump still wants that negotiation deal to happen. And in the meantime, the Canadian market space is actually crumbling right before everybody's eyes. So if the new essentially Prime Minister of Canada doesn't do anything quick, Canada is going to be sliding even further downhill than what Justin Trudeau was doing. Justin Trudeau did a horrendous job of trying to control Canada's market space. He did a horrendous job. The new essentially leader of Canada is doing even a worse job. Honestly, best wishes to Canada regarding their market spaces. Also, regarding these market spaces of how they relate back to essentially the crypto market space and so on. Well, as the traditional market spaces keep on eroding from, investors are going to run towards alternative assets, which is gold or cryptocurrency, like the Japanese market space. In the past, the Japanese market space will tumble, it will take down the stock market and the crypto market with it. Now, the Japanese market is for a tumble, the crypto market is as an alternative to the Japanese tumble, because Japanese investors are actually going towards crypto assets as an alternative. They're not seeing it as a spec anymore. So if more countries keep on eroding from within, then their investors within those countries are going to start hedging in towards alternative assets, which in this case is seen as crypto and gold. That's the correlation to currencies. Now, Elon Musk is what we're going to talk about now. Elon Musk X money to launch soon beta mode. We've talked about Elon Musk and essentially the X app turning into some sort of a crypto app or a payment app and so on. And everybody's talked about this crypto, that crypto, or multitude of cryptos and so on. But there are announcements coming out, and very soon we could have a X money come is what's happening. So here it is. Elon Musk announcing that essentially X money, his neutral services, will soon be available in beta mode, marking a step for the platform, formerly known as essentially as Twitter. The introduction of X Money could transform the platform's functionality, integrating social interactions, financial transactions, and potentially extending its reach and influence digital payment landscapes. Elon Musk has confirmed that X Money is a payment service that's coming soon in beta. This move aligns with essentially Elon Musk's vision of expanding X into a platform offering more than just social media to its users. The initiative also involves key players, Elon Musk and CEO Linda. X Payments LLC secured licensing in 41 US states. Market expectations are high, as these steps essentially signify serious commitment to this expensive project. X Payments LLC has secured money transfer essentially licenses in 41 states, showing serious financial commitment, expert analysts, financial analysts, and financial industry said. The announcement is likely to attract significant attention from investors and users. Cryptocurrency enthusiasts may be disappointed by the lack of immediate crypto integrations, though the potential user base remains a massive draw. Analysts also predict significant financial and regulatory implications, given the platform's extensive, essentially, user base and street position. Historical trends suggest parallels to WeChat's transformation in China. Real-world impacts remain to be seen as further details emerge. Musk seeks to emulate the success of WeChat, which revolutionized the online interaction. China historical precedents highlights the challenges of integration extensive financial services into social platforms successfully. We've been waiting for this for the longest time, to be fairly honest, regarding X payments, or essentially any payments happening on X's platform. Now, we don't know still if it'll be involved in cryptocurrencies, but from the licensings that essentially X payments has required, they're not really crypto licensed. But then again, we don't really have that much of regulations at it, so it could be a gray area on that matter as well. But let's just see what happens. But X payments is coming out soon, and it's going to be in beta mode. Now, ASEAN is what we're going to talk about now. So obviously we have the G7 group, the G20 group, and then we have the BRICS community, which completely fell apart. And we also have the group, which is the Asian countries like Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, and so on. And the Asian groups, the Asian countries have come together to do better trade negotiations because they're also crumbling from within as well. And so here it is. ASEAN agrees to lower barriers to boost regional trade. The World Economic Forum calls it a game changer for the ASEAN countries. The South Asian, essentially, leaders have endorsed trade and economic reforms to boost regional integrations in response to geopolitical tensions and fresh US tariffs, shock that threaten, essentially, export-driven economies in the region. The decision comes during the opening of the regional summit in Malaysia that happened today, the first high-level meeting since Washington imposed new tariffs on ASEAN exports on April 2nd. The 10-member day that came out approved an upgrade version of ASEAN trade in goods and adopted essentially a bold 20-year economic roadmap known as the ASEAN Community Vision 2044. According to Nikkei Asia, negotiations on upgraded essentially have been concluded, and the formal essentially signing is expected at essentially ASEAN's October summit coming up. The revised agreements could lower residential essentially tariffs and dismantle non-tariff barriers that strangle essentially the free movements of goods across the borders. Malaysia's also Trade Minister Zarif called the agreement the cornerstone of the ASEAN essentially economic integration, saying the bloc has ambitions of seamless inter-regional trade environments. The upgraded version features forward-looking and commercially meaningful essential provisions to boost regional trade and enhance supply chains resilience and deepening essentially ultra-ASEAN integrations. 90% of goods already cross are free, but economists say that the deal removes outdated customs and procedures, inconsistent documentation works that currently requires products that meet strict local essentially content and thresholds to benefit from tariff breaks. Officials ease essentially some of these essentially values thresholds through the final details are still under discussions. The agreement also introduces the standardization electronic exchanges of trade of documents, expect to simplify customs and cut transaction costs. These ASEAN countries are actually heavily into digital payments. To be fairly honest, Singapore was the first country to do some sort of a cross-border digital payment with the UAE, and Singapore is an ASEAN country. Further digitalization, they said, is expected to reduce trade costs with ASEAN regions, which is an indication that the ASEAN countries, the Southeast Asian countries, are going to go more into digital payments because they want to cut costs. They want to cut fees. How do you cut fees on transactions? By moving away from SWIFT and going to an alternative payment system. Well, we know for a fact that Singapore is very big on Ripple. I mean, Ripple was the first company, you could say, pretty much full approval from Singapore's monetary authority. We know the other Asian countries are also into CBDCs in the digital world, and they're saying it publicly that they want to move away from traditional payment systems. They want to further digitalize their payment systems and start working together on trade deals. Further digitalization is expected to reduce trade costs with the ASEAN regions. And essentially, the Japanese external organizations from Bangkok office, he noted the World Economic Forum has coined ASEAN digital of agreement as a game changer for the regional's economic growth. The forum essentially referred specifying the DEFA, a digital essentially economy framework agreement in ASEAN's economic strategy. They also said the DA is a strict blueprint for how nearly 680 million people access a digital future that is open and secure and exclusive. ASEAN countries are going to be the first countries to do cross-border payments together in terms of trades. 608 people are going to go fully digital in Asian countries, where they're doing digital trades, they're doing cross-border trades, domestic trades, and so on, going to be digital. According to the World Economic Forum, of 71% of all venture capital deals in the region in 2023 were tied to digital economy, outpacing the global average by 11%. Annual investments in communications and data services from $777 million in 2015 to $4.4 billion in 2024. The forum said the DEFA's implementation will accelerate this momentum and open doors for women entrepreneurs, rule-led youth-led startups within these nations. President Trump's administration's tariffs in April targeted ASEAN exports. The new duties range 10% on Singaporean goods to 49% on Cambodian and Laotian essential products as well. The trade policies ratified across Southeast Asia, especially export-dependent economies like Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. International traders are essentially now scrambling to protect their economies and consumer expenditure from fallouts, essentially from eased internal trade structures. A transition in geopolitical order is underway, and the global trading system essentially is under further strain from the recent implementation of U.S. essentially tariffs, warned Malaysia essentially Prime Minister Anwar in essentially his opening address at the meeting. He said essentially protecting essentially is researching as we bear witness to this multinational essentially nation that's created apart from the seeds, breaking apart from the seams. Now, he also revealed that he had written to Trump proposing a meeting between the US president and the ASEAN leader to calm their heads. The proposed summit could be held as early as October through location has been finalized. So, 8 countries, essentially Singapore and Philippines and essentially the rest of the countries of the Southeast Asian nations, are about to go fully digital. Genuinely, they're about to go fully digital. The World Economic Forum called it a change for the world, that the ASEAN countries are the first nation to go fully digital for domestic payments, for international, essentially cross-border payments. They're going to be the first to start working together in terms of trades as well. As I said, the World Economic Forum is calling it a game changer. That's incredible to see, honestly. Now, moving on from that genuinely incredible news, two, it also does show you how close we're getting, moving away from that traditional market space that we're used to this digital future that we're towards. It's not that far off. We're getting closer and closer to that finishing line of a digital future. Now, moving on from that to Charles, the founder essentially of Cardano. The founder of Cardano came out with a new perspective. And his new perspective is regarding coins, Ripple, and Circle. Charles supports Ripple's acquisition and attempt of potentials essentially of purchasing essentially Circle and USDC. The act could disrupt what he terms as self-serving network involving Coinbase, fostering a more diverse and competitive stablecoin market space. The continuous acquisition battles involves key crypto entities, Ripple, Coinbase, and Circle. Ripple and Coinbase are both poised to purchase Circle, issuer of USDC, for billions. The deal, if secured by Ripple, diversifies stablecoins ecosystem, as Charles has stated. Now, this is exactly what Charles had regarding should Ripple buy out Circle. This is what he said. He said, I think it would make the space better if Ripple essentially brought out Circle. There's essentially, he said, there's this Coinbase A16Z Circle mafia where they've built a system that's self-serving. If you're outside of it, you get blacklisted. It's hard to get listed, hard to get liquidity, and hard to access stablecoins. Adding that Ripple's acquisition could break that monopoly and create space for more projects. I do believe there is some sort of, you could say, in his words, a mafia essentially inside the crypto space. I do believe that there are, some hatred towards Ripple from certain parts of the crypto space. I see that all the time. We saw that happening when the SEC, for some oddly reason, decided to go after Ripple for no apparent reason. And then we saw essentially the hatred that was coming from other aspects. But, it makes sense. I do see that Circle mafia that's happening. So we had that mafia scenario inside the government, but we're also having that mafia scenario inside the crypto space, 100%, I would have to say. I agree with him. Ripple's possible acquisition could challenge existing routines in the crypto industry. Charles describes the current network involving Coinbase as a monopolistic essentially and supports Ripple for potentially enhancing market integrity, broadening competition. People and markets observe Ripple and Coinbase's takeover tussle. Charles' statements on potential positive impact emphasizes his disapproval of current market frameworks, particularly those associated with Coinbase. Financial implications are immense, and considering the multi-billion-dollar stakes involved, regulatory bodies may, however, raise concern regarding potential market dominance and changes. Still, such acquisitions carry the weight of industry precedents where large mergers may impact liquidity and market access. Historical acquisition battles of this magnitude are rare in the stablecoin domain. The implications of Ripple's takeover of Circle are substantial, as it essentially could facilitate changes in liquidity and accessibility for tokens like USDC and ADA, reshaping cryptocurrency frameworks as we know it. So the founder of Cardano actually kind of saying he thinks it's a great idea, Ripple going after Circle and purchasing Circle, because in his words, the mafia control that's being built inside the crypto space could come to where essentially Coinbase has a lot of say, Circle has a lot of say as well, A16Z has a lot of say as well regarding controlling certain parts of the crypto space, because what's backing Coinbase essentially is so on and so on. But what's backing Ripple is their own partnerships they essentially did. It's different the way Coinbase did it compared to the way Ripple's doing it. So you could kind of see that, there's this section of the crypto which is, a lot more transparent. And then there's the other side of the crypto space, which is very, very unstructured. And it's not a bad idea for Ripple to purchase out essentially Circle. Because as I said beforehand, Ripple is not to play nice. Ripple is here to take over. That's one of the main reasons they're actually not going towards a full IPO. If a company decides to go IPO, they're only doing it because they need money. As themselves, they need money. That's the only reason you go IPO. But also, when you go IPO, certain companies can buy out certain amounts of shares, and then they would have, a louder voice within your own company, and they could dictate which path your company takes. Ripple doesn't want to be controlled, in any sort of a way. They want to, choose their own path rather than go public, have an IPO, and Franklin Templeton, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, BlackRock, Blackstone, or so on, start purchasing our shares and dictating their movement. Some people might laugh at this and say, no, reality of it in any sort of a way, but it kind of is in some sort of a way, because whoever has the majority share has the majority. And yes, Ripple purchasing out Circle could break that monopoly that Coinbase has had for the longest time. I agree with essentially Charles. Now, International Monetary Fund is what we're going to talk about next. A veteran from the International Monetary Fund has come out and said, crypto is replacing the dollar in the shadows. In a recent interview with Bloomberg, Ragov, a former chief economist at the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and current Harvard University professor, described the dollar's global supremacy as fraying at the edges. Ragov believes that while the US dollar is still at the top currency, its impact is weighing due to an upward essentially trend in the euros and the Chinese essentially, and in particular the rise of cryptocurrencies. Kenneth explained that there is a growing trend away from the dollar's dominance. He said, I see it, dollar's dominance, as in decline. It's fraying at the edges where, of course, the Chinese essentially and the market space in general is breaking free from the dollar. The euro is going to have a larger footprint. That's essentially been going on for a decade. He also said, concerned senators on the underground for the shadow, a large and nearly untraceable part of the world's e-commerce, according to the World Bank and Ragov, account for about 20% of the world's gross domestic essentially products, or $20 to $5 trillion, and the traders in these markets mainly use US dollars, notes essentially for payments. Now, Kenneth believes that cryptocurrencies are moving essentially forward at a much more faster pace. This is coming from a perspective from the International Monetary Fund and now a Harvard professor. In his book, Ragov explains that Bitcoin and other digital assets are fast favored methods for dodging taxes and avoiding regulations. Although crypto has not made significant inroads in legal economies, it is increasingly used in the global underground economy, consisting of criminals, but mainly tax and regulatory evasions, where cash, especially US dollars, had been king. Normally the saying is cash is king. In his words, cash had been. Past tense. The consequences of this development are significant. Kenneth explains that having the main reserve currency is essentially a privilege that greatly benefits the US. If cryptocurrencies threatens the dollar's value, higher interest rates may follow all kinds of loans, like those for students, houses, or government. In addition to economies, Kenneth also stressed the importance of national security. The government depends on tracking dollar-dominated transactions to spot any dangers. Becoming more common, untraceable crypto could interfere with intelligence work and money control. That's here or there. There was an interview, essentially, a homeland officer, a ex-homeland officer, and they talked about, is crypto completely untraceable? Is it the best method for criminals? Is the best method for people who want to skip tax, or so on and so on? And the homeland officer said the best method, technically, if you want to, be off the grid, 100% off the grid, he said cash is the only thing that can make you off the grid. He said with crypto payments, you act up to a certain stage. And also, if you do any sort of movements inside the blockchain space, they can track you wallet to wallet to wallet until you do a mistake, which reveals your identity. He said, however, with cash, there's no trace. You could take that cash and go to Tijuana. They'll never know you had that cash. They'll never know you spent that cash. You could take that cash and go to China. You could take that cash and go to Moscow. You take that cash anywhere with you and spend it. And no one will ever know it belonged to you. But he said when it comes to cryptocurrencies, he said they can track you. He's a homeland officer. They said they can track you wallet to wallet to wallet when it comes to cryptocurrency. And at one point, most likely, people make mistakes. Will they'll transfer to their exchange? Will they'll transfer it that's linked to their bank card? Because, for example, let's say you're a type of person that's purchasing cryptocurrencies using your trust wallet, and your bank card is now linked to that particular trust through a money platform system like MoonPay, for example, which later on could give out certain information due to essentially the legal requirements we could possibly have when we have rules and regulations. So he's saying essentially, if you want to go off grid completely, a perspective coming from Homeland Officer, if you want to go off grid completely, cash is the only way to do it. With cryptocurrencies, they can still track you wallet to wallet to wallet until you make a mistake, reveal your identity. Now, so regarding what Kenneth said, essentially, technically not true. Now, Ragoff believes that cryptocurrencies should be essentially criticized for lacking inherent value. He said crypto has a deep essential value, and anyone who disagrees is simply incorrect. He argued that because it works well in a controlled deals, cryptocurrencies have, even though debated use of value. According to Ragoff, digital currencies may be at risk to how the dollar functions in unregulated economies. But he feels global financial markets will always prefer the dollar over the digital assets. He said, crypto can't replace the dollar, but that's in the legal economy where the government has a lot of leverage. But in the underground economy, by definition, it has much less leverage. His remarks are taking place alongside other policy discussions, as some US lawmakers propose essentially adding Bitcoin to reserve funds to help strengthen. While Ragoff admits that crypto is undeniably in the shadows, he does not think that it offers many benefits to mainstream essentially markets, which again, Ragoff is very wrong for saying that. Even though he is a ex International Monetary Fund member, and essentially he is now a professor at Harvard. For a professor to come out and say these absolute lies, I mean, stating essentially that crypto offers no benefits for the mainstream market. How about fees? How about essentially being transparent? Or how about essentially reducing time for payments? There's so much benefit when it comes to cryptocurrencies. This ideology or this argument that sometimes people have inside the government or ex-International Monetary Fund members have regarding crypto assets, that they bring no benefit to the mainstream. Essentially, they bring a lot of benefits. They bring tokenization benefit. They bring speed. They bring essentially being transparent as a payment system. Regarding fees being cut ridiculously to lowest possibly date when it comes to Swift payment systems, the XRP payments. The difference is humongous. So it's a big lie when they say crypto brings no benefits. It brings a lot of benefits. Kenneth also emphasizes that while cryptocurrencies are gaining traction in underground economies, the US dollar remains dominant in regulated global finance. Even so, the evolving situation raises important future problems. As crypto essentially is more widely used, economists must look at its impact on the economy, control of money, and leadership in financial markets globally. So that is essentially a perspective that's come out from a ex-International Monetary Fund member, also now a Harvard University professor, which is his perspective is all over the place when it comes to the crypto space. Yes, in his perspective, crypto is taking over. That's a fact. Crypto is creeping up on the traditional market spaces, 100%. But his other points regarding crypto being essentially it brings no benefits, wrong. It brings a lot of benefits to the table space. And regarding crypto essentially being where criminals hide all their money, wrong. Criminals also hide their money in cash because that's also untraceable as well. So his perspective was all over the place. But the main thing that was true, which is crypto is definitely creeping up on the traditional market space. That's a fact. Now, corporations is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about corporations, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you have questions or comments to make, put it down inside the comment section. More than happy to help you out. So let's comment section first. Then we go straight into the next news, which is regarding corporations and essentially their holdings of what's happening regarding crypto space. Good evening, Miles and family. Ian, good to see how you doing, how you've been. Kelly says, good evening, Miles and CMF. Good to see you as well. Kelly, how you doing? How you been? Mike says, good evening, Miles and CMF. Good to see you as well, Mike. How you doing? How you been? And Baba Unik says, why did you decide to move to Hungary? I haven't moved to Hungary. I don't live in Hungary. Now, corporations. Corporations enhance Bitcoin holdings aimed essentially treasury shift. In 2005, several major corporations integrated Bitcoin into their into their corporate treasuries. One of them obviously being biggest one that everybody knows, MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is in Bitcoin no matter what the price is, aiming to enhance their wealth and financial resilience. Companies like Tesla and MicroStrategy are at the forefront of holding substantial amounts of Bitcoin assets, reallocating essentially traditional fiat reserves into Bitcoin. Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy is set as a precedent by accumulating over 100,000 Bitcoins, showing a shift in corporate asset management. Companies worldwide followed MicroStrategy's footsteps on purchasing Bitcoin, the exact same blueprint he left behind. Bitcoin is the world's essentially right now it's the most purchased in terms of reserve asset and an emerging dominant monetary network. Hold'em essentially delivers both protection and performance to corporations seeking shareholder value, said Mike Saylor, the founder and chairman of Strategy. The corporate adoption of Bitcoin resulted in increased valuation and popularity of cryptocurrencies across financial markets. Key executives highlight Bitcoin as a benchmark for new capital allocations. Of Bitcoin's volatile history, the implications for corporate balance sheets and shareholders' values are complex. However, the trend does suggest a great acceptance of digital assets and finance. And historically, Bitcoin's inclusion in corporate treasuries has essentially revolutionized digital finance. Prior shifts like gold standard adoptions that's been happening for the longest time. Companies see similar potentials and benefits in Bitcoin stability. Experts also predict that this consolidation of Bitcoin essentially in corporate strategies to potentially stabilizing the presence of the market space, driven by a refined approach to asset diversification and risk management. It's true. There's a lot of corporations that are right now in Bitcoin essentially that's followed MicroStrategy's footsteps. Also, there's a huge amount of purchases coming in through regarding coin ETFs as well, which is why the market space for Bitcoin has been climbing ever so slightly. Now, Trump media is what we're going to talk about next. Reports apparently have come out that Trump media eyes a $3 billion boost for a treasury. Now, some people might assume that $3 billion that's coming out of somewhere from Trump media is going to go straight into Bitcoin. Turns out it's not going to go straight into Bitcoin, but it's diversified into certain crypto assets. So here it is. In a surprising move that has stirred the cryptocurrency market, Trump Media Group has announced its plans to produce $3 billion to invest in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. This development significant shift in traditional media landscapes, embracing blockchain technology's potential. The involvement, reported to be around $3 billion, aims to diversify Trump Media's group portfolio by incorporating investment cryptocurrencies and essentially cryptocurrencies and assets such as Bitcoin and so. This decision underlines the growing acceptance and integration of digital currencies within corporate investment strategies. With the large-scale essentially purchases, Trump Media Group is set to become the traditional media entities venturing digital currency domain, potentially influencing other companies to follow in suit. The announcement has had immediate repercussions in the market, particularly reflecting essentially the surge of Bitcoin's price. Then this initiative not only boosts the crypto market sentiment, but also reinforces the level of cryptocurrencies as a vital asset class among traditional investors. Moreover, this move could push further essentially advancements and innovations within the blockchain ecosystem, promoting developments of more robust financial products and services that align with decentralized financial essentially principles. The crypto community also and financial analysts are keenly watching the rollout of this investment, anticipates long-term impacts on both the media industry and the broader cryptocurrency networks. And essentially, there is a consensus that Trump Media's group's substantial investment in cryptocurrencies could be the precedent to more mainstream media channels exploring some, thereby essentially accelerating the adoption rate of cryptocurrencies globally. Because once America does anything inside the crypto world, in any sort of movements, the world will follow in suit. In conclusion, Trump Media's group bold stride into the cryptocurrency involvement realm signifies a pivotal moment for both the media and the blockchain industries. It not only enhances market confidence in cryptocurrencies, but also essentially sets a precedent for other media giants to consider digital currencies as essential components of their investment portfolios. As the landscape evolves, the fusion essentially of traditional media blockchain technology promises to unlock innovative opportunities and redefine industry standards. Trump Media is getting ready for a $3 billion per cryptocurrencies by the looks of it. Reports are coming out, and it's not just going towards Bitcoin. They haven't announced which cryptos they're going to go towards, but they're going to divert that money into certain crypto assets. A lot of money, but it's about the ripple effect that is going to cause, where once that happens, if it actually happens, if they actually raise $3 billion, if Trump actually raises $3 billion, if it actually invests $3 billion by diversifying into crypto projects, it's going to cause a ripple effect where essentially more institutions worldwide see that as a pivotal movement that they want to follow in suit. And whenever for Korea, it keeps on following Trump's footsteps inside the crypto market space. Now, New Zealand is what we're going to talk about next. Specifically, essentially, New Zealand's central bank. Because the central bank is about to cut its interest rates for the sixth meeting in a row due to the US and trade tensions. Is essentially cutting its rates back. The central bank is cutting its rates back to back, but the Fed still hasn't done even one. New Zealand Central Bank is poised to cut its key interest rates for the sixth meeting in a row, likely signaling that more will follow as rising US trade barriers cloud the economic outlook. The Reserve Bank of New Zealand is set to lower its official essentially cash rate by 25 basis points to 3.25%. at its policy meeting is going to be happening this Wednesday, according to essentially 22 out of the 23 economists surveyed by Bloomberg. One of the essential respondents expect a larger 50 essential point reduction. The Monetary Policy Committee is also expected to indicate that the OCR might fall below 3% before the end of the year. He said, we see the RBNZ's OCR profile being revised down by around 20 basis points to around 2.9% by the end of 2025. So Kelly, essentially the chief economist at Westpac in Auckland. Beyond this meeting, a data-dependent easing bias seems likely. Last month, the RBNZ noted that it had room to drive rates even lower as US tariffs pose downside risk to both activity and inflation. While some trade tensions essentially have eased, uncertainty remains and is expected to weigh in on essentially New Zealand's rebound essentially from last year's recession. The bank will publish its rate decisions at 2 p.m. local time on Wednesday, followed by a press conference on the governor question. It also may release updated economic forecasts, which should shed some light on how deeply the global trade strains could essentially go. Also, despite essentially tariffs, de-escalation, we continue to view the US and China trade war as a net negative to the New Zealand economy and inflation over the medium term, said Wesley, an economist at ASB Bank in Auckland. Pronounced essentially uncertainty means that the RBNZ Bank will want on policy moves, so we expect caution, data, and essentially ever dependent on the outlook of monetary policies. And recent indicators have painted a mixed picture. Unemployment held steady at 5.1% in the first quarter, defying essentially forecast of the rise, and commodity prices remain firm, and measures of inflation expectations have edged higher. Most forecasts, as well as the RBNZ itself, expect headlines to pick up essentially towards the top of the central bank's wanted 3% target from a range of its current essentially 2.2% before easing essentially back essentially before next year. At the same time, the is subdued, businesses' confidence has slipped, and last week's essentially tight government budget is projected by the Treasury to leave scope of further rates. Some essentially economists predict that the OCR will fall to 2.5% by the year end, while making pricing implies a fair chance of a move to 2.75%. In this kind of environment, there is plenty of leeway for strategy to play a role, said Sharon, the chief New Zealand economist at NZ Bank in Auckland. We continue to expect that RBNZ will ultimately deliver CR of 2.5%, but we don't expect them to signal such an outcome at this. So let me get this straight. The Central Bank of New Zealand had to do 6 rate cuts, and we're still waiting on Jerome Powell to do 1 rate cut for the US markets. Every centralized bank that hits the news, all they're talking about is either the crypto market or, but we can't even get 1 rate cut from Jerome Powell. This is why, honestly, that if there was a vote on this man, even though I'm not a US citizen, I will vote from across the pond to remove Jerome Powell as the Fed chairman. What a useless person. Honestly, every centralized bank around the world is pretty much on their 3rd or 4th rate cut. And New Zealand is getting to their 6th cut. And we're still waiting for 1 rate cut from Jerome. Florida proposes eliminating state capital gains tax on crypto and stocks. That's an interesting play. Now, we've seen regarding cryptocurrencies, because some countries are thinking about, removing certain when it comes to crypto. But and stocks is from Florida. Florida lawmakers have introduced a bill to remove state capital gains tax on profits from cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and XRP. They've mentioned those 2 assets out of the 26,000 crypto projects out there. Florida lawmakers have introduced a bill to remove state capital gains tax on profits from cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and XRP, traditional stocks. If passed, the legislation would allow investors to retain more essentially earnings from asset sale, positioning Florida as a potential hub for crypto activity. Yes, if it's tax-free for crypto gains, then yes, you're going to get a lot of investors coming into Florida, crypto investors. The proposal, backed by Governor Ron DeSantis and Republicans, aligns with former President Donald Trump's pro-crypto agenda and could influence a broader U.S. tax policy. The bill exempts state-level taxes on capital gains, but leaves essentially federal taxes unchanged. Investors would still owe fees of up to 37% on short-term profits, though Florida aims to reduce local burdens. Bitcoin 2.4%, essentially following the announcement. XRP gained 2.2% following the announcement, and analysts suggest that the policy could accelerate Bitcoin's essentially climb towards higher levels. This initiative mirrors Trump's push for friendly regulations, leveraging Republican control in 27 states to advance similar reforms. Florida could attract businesses and high net essentially worth investors seeking tax reliefs, and critics warn of complications, noting disparities between the two states, and the federal rules might confuse fillers. A state-level tax shift could pressure Congress to essentially recess its federal policies, potentially streamlining regulations. So now the bill underscores a growing divide between state and federal approaches to digital assets. So Florida essentially state to make it tax-free, but only on capital cryptocurrencies, which again, it should be there anyways, to be fairly honest. Capital on cryptocurrencies should not exist in general. But it's nice to see that the American states are coming forward and trying to propose this idea. If it passes, then Florida sure could slowly become a hotspot for cryptocurrency users, and a lot of investments could be brought to the table as well. But if more states follow that in suit, more countries follow that in suit, it would be brilliant. Unlike France, which is thinking about taxing its on capital gains and cryptocurrencies. So France wants its users to sell their cryptos so they can pay taxes. What a useless country that is. And the European Central Bank leader, Christian Lagarde, comes out and goes, the European economy is the strongest economy out there, and nobody should look any further than the European economy. It's freedom, and everything else comes with it. Yes, I can see there's a lot of in France when they're telling their own crypto users, their own citizens, that they have to sell their cryptos to pay taxes because they want their capital gains tax. If you hold your cryptos in France, you're paying taxes. The law hasn't passed yet in France, but it has been suggested. And just suggesting that as a law just shows how backwards you are. Now, Binance CEO Richard Tang is what we're going to talk about next. But let's go to the comment section first before we talk about the Binance CEO Richard Tang's perspective on the market space and crypto's future in general. Joe says Trump should buy 4 billion XRP and pay off the whole of the US debt when XRP hits 10K. Why not? Sky's the limit, honestly. Now, Binance CEO Richard Tang advocates for long-term vision for crypto growth. Fact. A lot of people still have this mindset regarding the crypto space that, some people have this short-term mindset inside the crypto space. And you should have a very, very term mindset inside the crypto space. We're just getting started in terms of, the regulations are coming in, the institutions are coming in, the banks are coming inside the crypto space, and the rest of the world is about to, make some footsteps in the regulations as well. I mean, even today we talked about the ASEAN countries, the South countries, wanting to get more inside this digital world, and they want to do trades with each other in this digital world, and the World Economic Forum calling it a game changer, essentially, and so on. So, honestly, you have to have this bright, essentially, you have to have this, this thought pattern of, not thinking about today, but thinking about tomorrow instead. By tomorrow, I don't mean literally tomorrow, I mean future-wise. Because but quite a lot of people, maybe inside the crypto space, could still have this mindset of, we're going to go through a cycle, we're going to go up, we're going to come back down, we're going to go down for 4 years and go back up again after 4 years, and so on and so on. And that's correct. Everything's changed. You need to understand that everything has changed in the crypto space. We're not stuck on those previous, historical cycles we've been in before. We're in the era of rules and regulations, banks, institutions, ETFs, on a world that we've never been in before. So you've got to understand that, we're moving away from crypto being like stocks, buy, sell, that we're going to go slowly into, or who knows, faster into utility, which is very different to the whole scenario we have now, which is just buy, sell, just to make a profit. Or some people holding onto the crypto assets. But in general, we're going to go into utility, which is a game changer for crypto assets, for certain crypto assets. So you need to understand that fundamental, that we've moved away from that traditional buy, sell. We're moving away from that traditional buy, sell to utility. Regulations, ETFs, ETBs, cross-border payments, domestically, internationally, worldwide. Banks, institutions, worldwide. Now, Binance CEO's perspective on this future. Teng, CEO of Binance, recently shared insights on his highlighting the importance of a long-term investment perspective in cryptocurrencies. His message centered at the growth and community value that long-term can achieve. Teng's comments emphasizes the potential small investments made early, noting that the power of time and steadfast belief in crypto sector. His remarks sparked community interest and discussions about effective strategies for long-term growth in the industry. Richard Teng's statement on social media stressed the importance of a long-term vision in cryptocurrency industry. He remarked that early investors have the potential for exceptional growth, retreating essentially that the benefit of concentrating on community value over time. His emphasis essentially on patience and strict investments aligns with the widespread market trends favoring long-term profitability over short-term gains. The Binance CEO's resonates with recent shifts within the industry as well, promoting stable growth over fleeting profits, the immediate implementation stress and necessities for essentially investors to incorporate a broader focus on sustainable development with their portfolios. Teng's advice fosters investor confidence, promoting renowned interest and engagements with currency communities. Reactions from notable industry figures highlighting strong agreements with Teng's stance on essentially investment strategies. As quoted essentially by analysts, long-term perspective holds on key volatile markets like crypto. His remarks echoes the emphasis on due diligence and forward thinking essentially on Teng encouraged through their platforms. Teng's perspective on long-term investments mirrors historical trends where patient investors' approaches in volatile markets like cryptocurrencies have often yielded higher returns compared to short-term speculative efforts. Insights from essentially the research team suggest that a shift towards regulatory clarity and technological innovation might facilitate further long-term financial goals. This little part is the key factor. So just want to read this out again. This is the factor here that everybody needs to, some people already understand this, some people might not understand this, some people might not even know about this. This is the key part where he essentially says, regarding the research teams have suggested that a shift towards regulatory clarity and technological innovation might facilitate further long-term financial gains. What essentially the simplicity means is that the further we go into rules and regulations, the further we go into utility, which means certain crypto projects are going to be like fireworks, and they're going to go higher and higher and higher until they run out of fuel, which then they'll stabilize at certain price points. And then they'll get more fuel while they'll go higher and higher, depending on how many banks, how many institutions, how many countries worldwide are using that asset. And when we go further and further into regulations, when certain projects will become like fireworks due to their utility, we're going to see them essentially completely detach themselves from Bitcoin. Well, because of their utility, they're just going to go at certain price points because they're going to be used 24/7. So, for example, XRP, XLM, XDC, HBAR, AVAX, a lot of crypto projects out of Solana. There's a lot of crypto projects out there that are just going to go full utility mode. They're going to completely detach themselves from Bitcoin, and they're just going to go on their own. And for example, because they're used 24/7, wherever category they're in, due to their utility. If we have, for example, let's just say, China, for example, attacks Taiwan. Let's just say randomly. Let's say XRP, for example, just as an example. Let's say XRP is being used by certain banks, for example, or institutions around the world. And it's being used 24/7 as a payment system. Let's just say China, for example, strike Taiwan and a war starts. XRP wouldn't be affected because it's being used now as a payment system. Sure, it might feel a bit of a tumbling, but it's being used 24/7 as a payment system. It will no longer be, essentially when Bitcoin tumbles because of geopolitical tensions and the crypto markets. When we have regulations, we're going to go into utility When we go into utility, certain crypto projects will, one, detach, and two, go on the separate paths, and three, be used 24/7 as a payment system. So if XRP is being used as a payment system, as a medium of payment system, or a gas token, 24/7, it wouldn't come down because payments are still happening. Business is still being conducted domestically and internationally. Therefore, it wouldn't come down in price because it's no longer reacting like a stock, up, down, buy, sell. It's reacting as a utility infrastructure, as a payment system. So that is a very key point they made, essentially, that the research team suggests that shift towards regulatory clarity and technological innovation might facilitate further long-term financial gains. Facts. And historical data, positive correlation between essentially technological advancements and market growth, giving investors grounds for optimism about sustaining this trajectory. Facts. Now, on the topic of XRP, the XRP essentially gets a boost from the World Economic Forum. XRP gets a boost from the World Economic Forum, and it's recognized in their new report. So here it is. The XRP ledger, or XRPL, has been acknowledged by the World Economic as one of the most important technologies for tokenizing assets throughout the globe. This acknowledgement will boost investors to prefer XRP more than other cryptos, even though Ripple's XRP ledger and XRP coin are different. In its, essentially, this is the World Economic Forum report. So in its May 2025 report from the World Economic Forum titled Asset Tokenization in Financial Markets. So that's the title of the documentation, Assets and Tokenizations in Financial Markets, 2025 from the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum noted that Aurum Equity Partners has launched the world's first private equity and debt tokenized fund valued at $1 billion on the ledger. So it's the World Economic Forum highlighting XRP ledger on their new report that came out for this month of tokenization, and saying that essentially this partnership is what we're going to mention in the tokenization sector on our reports. This fund, they said this fund uses the XRP decentralized layer 1 blockchain technology to turn ownership private equity into digital tokens. It was first announced by Aurum Equity in October 2012 and was created to support data centers that use AI and focus environmental, social, and governance ESG. ESG is basically social credit systems for institutions. Some will say no, but it technically is. Issues in the US and UAE, Saudi Arabia, India, and Europe. The fund makes use of essentially Zonic, which is essentially from the Chartered Bank. Zonic is also a partner of Ripple. They made that partnership happen in the UAE, Standard Chartered Bank, Zonic, Ripple. The fund makes use of Zonic's tokenized asset lifecycle management platform, along with essentially DYCIST protocol to keep investments secure and easy to trade. XRP Ledger essentially is APT is a choice for the kind of digital fund as it is secure, fast, and low cost to transact on. The report also Ripple's crypto custody technology, which it mentions along with and Metaco. Metaco was essentially, as we know, purchased by Ripple. These companies help keep digital assets safe and financial institutions meet rules and regulations. This custody service is key supporting the new tokenized economy. It's true, because think about it. Ripple is ahead of the game, if you really think about it. By purchasing out Metaco, by making Metaco partner up essentially with HSBC Bank, with IBM, and so on and so on. Ripple realized that they need to, create some sort of a high-grade wallet solution for institutions. Because sure, the retail section can use Tangent or Ledger, but you're not going to be BlackRock, for example, or Blackstone, or Goldman Sachs, or JP Morgan, or someone using Ledger or Tangent wallets. You might, you could see their employees using it, but you don't see it as, the company using it. That's more for the retail section to be using. So Ripple realized they need to provide some sort of a solution for institutions. Institutions can feel safe, keep huge amounts of assets. We're talking billions or sometimes trillions, depending on what they're storing in there. That's why Ripple just started Metico to fill that gap inside the market space that's going to come around, because the more banks and so on that join the crypto space, they're going to need where to store all of that digital money. And that's where Ripple comes in with Metico. So Ripple was, miles ahead of the game. They realized that this scenario is going to come up in the future, so they're going to fill their gap. They're going to fill that market gap, starting essentially from whenever they brought Metico essentially in the picture, back in 2023, 22. Now, the report also praised Ripple's custody essentially technology, which mentioned along with Bitco and Metico. Metico was recently essentially acquired by Ripple. These help keep digital assets essentially safe and help financial institutions meet relations. The custody service essentially is key to supporting the new tokenized economy, a World Economic Forum. The global private equity market is expected to grow essentially $5.3 trillion in 2023 to $7 trillion 2030. Around 10% is likely to be tokenized. XRP Ledger's role in tokenizing a $1 billion fund sets a model for others to follow. Meanwhile, Ripple and Under Finance regarding their partner earlier this year to bring tokenized US Treasury funds to the XRP Ledger. The fund also backed by BlackRock's Build Fund and offers safe, compliant investments in government bonds and on-chain. In recent studies, Ripple and Boston Consulting essentially group predicted that the real-world asset tokenization from the market space we're in right now to an 18.9 trillion market space by 2023, with a compound annual growth rate of 53%. Just want to point out, honestly, if there is anybody out there inside crypto space that is doubting you or criticizing you for holding XRP, believe me, there's going to be a time when the table's going to be turned around and you're going to tell them you had every opportunity to look into this asset or even to go for this asset. It's not financial advice, is what I'm stating right now. But believe me, if there is somebody out there that's criticizing you for holding XRP, or essentially there's XRP in general, there is anybody around you that's doing that to you as well, because they could be family members, it could be work colleagues or so on. Believe me, there's going to be a time when they're going to send the tables are going to be turned around and you're going to say to them, you had everything to buy, but instead you're left behind. I'm telling you right now. XRP, just to add that, XRP strikes options go live on crypto.com. ETF hype. Crypto.com now offers XRP strikes options on its website, allowing users to anticipate XRP's price movements and potentially profits. This is currently essentially available to users inside the United States, and all you need is minimum of $10 of trading. Strike options are also one of the type of regulated cryptocurrency derivatives, and according to the statement, they work as simple yes or no questions, and you bet on that the price of XRP will exceed or fall short of strikes and price in 20 minutes. Because you can change your forecast at any time before the 20 minutes period ends, you have more freedom. Crypto.com essentially provides strike options and trading on non currencies as well. XRP now essentially is trading around $2.31, with price movements based on general market circumstances and regulated essentially updates. Speculation is also regarding the listings of US-based XRP ETFs, just want to point this out, have also exceeded and they've risen. Now, Polymarket, which essentially people want for anything, pretty much, people betted on the presidency of Trump winning, and essentially it turned out to be true. 83% are now saying that XRP ETFs are on play. 83% chance of XRP ETFs happening. I'll be very honest. This case is on paper and it's settled and dusted forever. Straight after there should be XRP ETFs, because there is no any reason, there's no excuse, there's no reason whatsoever that the SEC could come up with, after that case is fully settled on paper, that the SEC could come up with to essentially to extend an XRP ETF after the case is fully settled on paper. Because for the extend, ETFs for Solana, for Cardano, for HBAR, or for whatever, It's because they say they want to look into it before they approve it, which is fair enough. But there is no way in hell that the SEC can use that excuse for XRP, because as far as we all are aware inside the crypto space, the number one crypto project the SEC has had the most amount of look into is the XRP ledger. It's XRP, it's XRP ledger, it's the entire framework of Ripple's company. So the moment this case is over and dust is settled on paper between Ripple and the SEC, there is no excuse whatsoever, not even a single reason that the SEC should extend an ETF straight afterwards. They should just approve it afterwards, which is why they're basing it on an 85% chance or 83% chance of an XRP ETF happening soon. And, once again, XRP on the World Economic Forum, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be one of those assets that most make an incredible wealth on, or a lot of people just miss out on. Because XRP is just one of those gems. It's a rare gem. It's either you're going to make a lot of money from it because you're in it, or you're going to lose a lot of money because you never had it. Now, on that note, we've also come to the endings of tonight's live. This was the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, this was episode 315 of the CMF. And, you can tune into this live Monday to Friday, where I talk about the most recent news that's happening around the world in terms of cryptocurrency, CBDC, politics, regulations, vital information you should know about regarding the world completely transforming into a digital space. I also just want to say one thing. The disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. I also just want to say one thing as well. I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks to a Spanish island, and it's going to be, so at the 31st is when I'm leaving pretty much. So CMF members, just want to give you a heads up. On the 31st of this month, I'm going to go on vacation for 2 weeks. So it's going to be difficult to do this live. But obviously, I'll be, in the CMF chat, in the CMF Telegram group, on X. People can always message me if you have any questions and so on. But obviously, the live show is going to continue tomorrow and the day after and the day after and the day after. But after the 31st, I'm going to be on vacation for 2 weeks. But tune in tomorrow for episode 316 of the CMF Live. Save rate tomorrow. CMF, save rate tomorrow. Same timing as usual for episode 3 tomorrow. I'm also on late, no problem. Good to see how you've been. Okay, I was here. Trump should. Happy to be in Florida. Let's go autistic. EU economy is strong, and much as Macron, he was laughing these days. Yeah. I was in CMF. I'm sorry, I'm a bit late. No problem, George. Good to see you. Hey, how you doing? Fantastic show as always. Miles, thank you for sharing your valuable time. I appreciate you. Let's go, Joe. Thanks for your kind words. Night, Miles, and CMF. Let's go, Pablo. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Thanks, Legend. Night and day, CMF. Let's go, Shelly. See you same time as usual as well. Please, Miles, sort out the mic for tomorrow as we're struggling to hear you. Yes, I will. I don't know why, but I will definitely. Miles, good night, Miles and CMF. Mike, let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Good night, Miles and all CMF. Thank you. And news, JP. Let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Good night, Miles. Funky brother. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Great live. Everyone, like, share, comment. So take care. Oh, let's go. Ray, facts. If you haven't CMF members, like, comment, retweet. If you already haven't. If you followed me during this live, you subscribe to me or followed me on X or YouTube, depending on where you're watching from. Thank you as well. Welcome to the CMF. Enjoy, bro. Let's go, Funky brother. I will see everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual, 11:25 London time, for episode 316 of the CMF Live. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. Night, Miles. Let's go. Same time as usual.